Welcome back to the morning agenda right here on Power 106 FM. My name is Sanjay Lewis. Roy Clark, Member of Parliament for St. James Central, says he plans to table a motion for paternity tests to be done at birth. He believes this will address the problem of domestic violence. Mr. Clark raised the issue on Tuesday while making his contribution to this constituency debate in the House of Representatives. He told the House that cases of domestic violence that lead to murder are high. And according to a study done by social anthropologist Dr. Herbert Gale, one of the cases of domestic violence stems from paternity issues. Meanwhile, gender rights activist Nadine Spence brands mandatory paternity tests at birth unsound and an attempt at women shaming. Ms. Spence hit back saying that the comments are aligned to what she calls the male backlash, men who want to shame women into silence. Ms. Spence says proposing that paternity fraud causes domestic violence is tantamount to victim blaming. Well, we want to have a discussion about that, and we have with us gender rights activist Nadine Spence, and we also have psychologist Dr. Leahcim Semaj with us. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Morning.
Dr. Semaj?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Let me start with you, Dr. Semaj. The proposal put forward by Roy Clark, is there any merit to it?
It raises a very important and interesting question. And I'm starting, first of all, I'm a psychologist, I'm an activist, but I do believe it has raised some very important questions in our society. Slavery intervened in how we approach parenting. You know, I had a very interesting experience many years ago. A man came to see me, an older man, that, you know, he's having some serious problems with his son. Son was very disrespectful, almost bordering and wanted to fight him at times and so on. And when we brought the son in, and we talked and talked and talked, and the son listened and listened, and he said, you know, Doc, my father has no right to even talk to me. I know what happened. And the son went on to explain that he knows that the helper is really his mother. And he was raised in a situation to believe that his father's wife was his mother. But his father got the helper pregnant, and the wife accepted the child, and they covered it up as such. But then when he found out over the years, he despised his father more and more and more. Now, I say that because, look, we had a situation coming out of slavery where that bond between father and child was not allowed to be established. What was raised in Parliament, I think we need to get beyond the semantics and the sophistry. And two fundamental realities I'm facing. Do fathers have a right to know who their children are? One. Two, do children have a right to know who their father is? There's no question. We know our mothers. Now, the core of your identity, half of it is who is your father. And what the data, the research shows us that paternal involvement is one of the big predictors of adult adjustment, much more so than maternal involvement. The role of a father in a child's life, and that's something that we have lacked in Jamaica. Now, anything that will help us get to the point where fathers know and children know, because that's the beginning, that's the foundation on which we now build the law of parenting, that you have a responsibility to feed, clothe, shelter, educate, and positively socialize any child you cause to be brought into the world. So that's my position.
But it's two different things that we're arguing here then, because what the MP is putting forward is that it would reduce the incidence of domestic violence. Do you think that the need to have paternity tests at birth that would reduce the incidence?
It is one. I think it's more important than that. And my answer is it could clearly add to, because one of the things that growing up not knowing and growing up with doubts and so on, those are one of the areas that triggers dispute between people. So that I'm not using that as a red herring, I'm saying that it is good to have paternity tests at birth so that You know who your father is, and the man know who his child is. Now, yes, anything that causes dispute between people, anything that causes doubt, anything that causes uncertainty, and people are living with it year after year after year, it keeps coming up, it keeps coming up. But if we can eliminate it at the beginning, I see no reason for, giving some serious thought, knowing who your father is, knowing who your child is. Everyone benefits from that.
Nadine Spence, the study that MP Clark made reference to was from Dr. Herbert Gale. And Dr. Gale says 1 of 5 persons is really a jacket, he says, based on his study, which is also called paternity fraud, as he was trying to describe yesterday. And he says there's a lot of violence over the discovery that a child is not that of the father. Based on your research, Nadine Spence, is it that paternity fraud contributes to incidences of domestic violence?
Does the answer have to be based on my research? You're asking me my opinion.
Oh, your opinion, yes.
Oh, so the question that I would have liked to pose to Dr. Gill, and perhaps to you too, and to Dr. Semaj, is it that the claim is that every time there is a domestic violence incident in Jamaica, a situation where a woman is killed, and we must remember now that the families of the women who've been killed are listening, and the people who know the stories behind what is happening are listening. So every time that a woman is killed or beaten up in a situation of gender-based violence or violence against a particular woman, it's because she gave the man gun. It's because she gave the man.
Nadine.
That's what we are saying.
Nadine.
So give it a chance to respond, Dr. Samaj. Finish.
Yeah, me just start down.
Finish the point, lady.
This is what people suggest, and then the member of parliament is saying that because this is so widespread, and because this is why men are killing women in Jamaica, if we have paternity tests, then we solve the problem. Because then men won't have to get angry enough so that they want to kill and beat women. I find that to be problematic. And I find it even more problematic that we have well-thinking people who would publicly make such a claim and then defend it. Because gender-based violence, we all know, even when we are trying to deny the causes of it, we know the cause of it. We've discussed it. We've gone through it already, and then you have to ask them now, why is there this studied movement to undermine women's right to speak about issues of violence? And that's what it is. This is the matter of paternity fraud. It's a matter that is relevant and stands on its own and needs to be discussed. Yes, we agree. Mm-hmm. Do we need to discuss it in the context of domestic violence to say that, this is the cause of domestic violence? So in other words, if women want to get beaten and get killed, they need to stop this man gun. That's the other thing that it implicates. That it is women who are then the source of their own murder, the source of their own beat up. So they know what to do to stop it.
Isn't that an unfair supposition, though, Nadine Spence? No, because wouldn't you agree that paternity fraud, when you look at it, it contributes, whether we don't have the research, but just us looking at the matter, it contributes to the incidences of domestic violence?
How would we know that? Tell me, how would we know that? And if it is that we don't have a much more sustained body of work.
The Dr. Gales did the study, and he says it does. So is it that Dr. Gale did this study, and he's saying that it contributes to the incidences of domestic violence?
The study printed anyway. In the world of academia, it would have to be split somewhere, and his peers would have had to do the necessary look at this study for us to say, okay, well, this is we have. It's more than just coming on radio and saying I did the research. When you asked me the question about research, I could also say to you, my research says otherwise. I could also say that to you, but that doesn't mean that I would have done the research. Right. It could be a hunch, it could be a feeling I have, it could be that I'm being a populist academician. It doesn't mean that it's the truth. I could be just playing into a sentiment, and in Jamaica there's a growing anti-woman sentiment, and that there are a lot of men from the men's rights movement who are tapping into this anti-woman sentiment and are pushing back in what is called the male backlash, and this is not a phenomenon that is particular to those Jamaican men who are hitting back against women who speak about women's subjugation.
Dr. Semaj, you wanted to come in?
No, I'm saying that as I started by saying we have to get beyond semantics and sophistry. When Nadine started with posing a thing, are you saying that every incident, once you start an argument like that, the answer must be no? So that I refuse to get in this red herring of a debate. My question is it a good idea for there to be paternity testing at birth? Is there any benefit to it? My answer is overwhelmingly yes. Is domestic violence something that we should stamp out, whatever we need to do? My answer is yes. And by the way, the most significant gender-based violence that exists is against men. Men are the ones who largely get killed, and they get killed by other men. So that, for me, where I stand, there's a non-issue. It's a red herring to say that, look, every instance, if this will wipe out gender-based violence. Absolutely not. Gender-based violence is much broader in every society and ours. But yes, paternity fraud is a significant thing that impacts men, women, and children. And we can't build a nation based on lies. So we need to do that. We also need to teach people how to respect each other and how to settle disputes without the need for violence. We need to do that also. So I'm not saying that you do this and you wipe out that. I'm saying that we need to build a society coming out of our slavery base. Fathers need to know who their children are. Children need to know who their father is. We need to respect each other, and we need to reduce the violence in the society at every level.
Nadine Spence, you heard what Dr. Semaj just indicated. I want you to respond to that.
I'm more interested in looking at the proposal. I thought that was all we're having a conversation about. And my question is it okay for government to intervene in a relationship at the beginning of the relationship, even when there is no doubt? Because I think people go in search of paternity tests when there is doubt of paternity. And I remember that I had been hearing that there are people who've done research from the center that does paternity. And they were clear to say, paternity testing, they were clear to say, look here, we're not trying to generalize to the rest of Jamaica. We know that there are people who have questions about paternity. And when they do, they come to us. And so of the people who come to us, and a large percentage of the people who come to us, it turns out that there is a problem with paternity.
Yes.
It's not that the population has been tested, and we find that 30% of children don't. No, it's the percentage of those who go to get paternity tests that makes it problematic. So does it mean then that government has the right in the life of a couple to say immediately upon pregnancy or birth or at whatever time it becomes viable, you must take a paternity test because the government wants to ensure that this child belongs to that person. There are men who've had situations where they discover that a child is not theirs, and they continue to take care of the child regardless. It's not an automatic descent into violence and murder.
Yes.
And so I think the statement, the issue about paternity fraud or paternity, whatever it is, needs a conversation. Yes, we know that. And the issue of domestic violence needs a conversation. We don't need a politician to go in parliament, however, saying if we impose a law on paternity tests and all couples upon pregnancy have to take a paternity test, it means that we solve the problem of domestic violence. That's what I'm discussing.
Right. And to be fair to Dr. Gale, he indicated that instituting such a policy, that of paternity tests at birth, may not solve the problem, and instead it may increase the problem. And he indicated that social intervention and public education are ways that we can solve the problem of paternity fraud, which is a separate issue, as you are rightly indicating. Nadine Spence. Maybe we need to look into that direction of the social intervention and the public education in opposed to a politician calling for mandatory paternity tests at birth. You agree with me?
Okay, there's a way in which over there,
yes,
Black African families have inherited this reputation that this is part of how African families or African Jamaican, African American families operate, and that we can't trust Black people. We have to be careful when we go into public and have these conversations without delving into what they mean and the implications they have for us as a race and a people. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's to just get up in Parliament and make that supposition. It's furious, and it raises several issues about the thought processes that our politicians engage in when they suggest public policy. Yes. What problem are they? Have they done the necessary research? Are they being informed by the reality on the ground? Or are they just seeking a forward in Parliament because they recognize that the anti-woman sentiments in this country are so strong that there are so many people who are pushing back at this idea of the strong and independent woman, that they feel that there is a way that they have to articulate their maleness by personifying a kind of reality that says, women are at fault for what is happening to them. And it's problematic. As a woman living in this country, as a Jamaican who has the right to speak, it's problematic to hear Jamaican men get up and voice those who do, most of them do. But those who are on the men's rights campaign, yes, it's problematic the perspective they take about women in their agenda.
Dr. Semaj, what do you make of it? Social intervention, public education, that will help to solve the problem of paternity fraud, in opposed to going the route of mandatory paternity tests at birth.
Well,
isn't that a better proposal?
Not necessarily. From the standpoint that once a woman, we make certain assumptions about paternity. We assume that if a woman is married, that this man that she's married to, he's the legal responsibility person, for that child. And where the problem came about is, Nadine was a little disingenuous a while ago. It's not by just persons seeking paternity tests. Like so many other social...
Hold on, Nadine. I'm going to give it a chance to respond. Go ahead, Dr. Semaj.
As so many things in Jamaica come about because of U.S. intervention. When the United States insisted that persons applying for visa status and so on must now prove that the child is there, and they required paternity DNA tests, that is what unleashed a lot of data, which showing going back, way back, a lot of children who they thought was their father was not their father. So it was not just people just on their own having doubts. Many of these people had no doubts about their children and paternity. But the U.S. needed documentation that this is indeed your child. That is what showed up the 30-odd% of such individuals, that the paternity of the child was questionable, was wrong. We knew for sure who was not the father. We don't know who was the father because nobody was checking for that. So I'm not speaking as an activist. I have no axe to grind. But I do believe that anything we can do to get a more just society.
No, Nadine, hold on.
Get a more just society.
No, hold on. Yes. Go ahead, Dr. Semaj.
Anything that leads to a more just society. We have a problem in Jamaica with violence. We have a problem with parenting. We have a problem with child development. All of these things. So that there's no point scoring. Nobody wins in a point scoring. We need to address all of these issues to the best of our ability in the interest of our children.
But making it mandatory, that is the argument, Dr. Semaj. And are we really solving the problem if we're making it mandatory? Because as Nadine rightly put forward, you have some families, there's no doubt who the father of the child would be. So why then call for it to be mandatory? I think that is the argument.
Well, I don't. We see, we make assumptions about who is the child's father. Shouldn't that assumption be based on definable criteria? we make assumptions. We're saying that because Nadine says that John is the father of the child, we now use that to label the child and to document. And there's so many. If the reason is the person's name that she called, if it was spurious or it was wrong, it can impact that child's life in so many ways. So the very fact that we're going to put a father's name on a birth certificate, you're going to say somebody is a father of a child. That should be based on credible information, not just hearsay, not just somebody, one person saying so. I have no problem.
Coming from that premise, Dr. Semaj, then in a sense you're saying that all females are liars.
No. We're not saying that. We're not saying that at all. We're saying that you make a statement, but the statement should be based on fact.
Oh dear.
What's wrong with a statement being based on fact? If I'm saying that you are my sister, it's not just a social construct. I'm saying that we are biologically connected. So that absolutely nothing wrong with having something. You see, there was a time when we did not understand how biology worked, and we made all kind of assumptions. But the fact that saying something is so doesn't make it so, and we say, look, we need for it to be documented. Yeah. I see no problem with that.
Nadine, giving the final word to you because we have to.
I am not here arguing paternity and whether that's not the issue. The issue is whether or not that's the issue I was asked to talk about.
Yes.
Does government have the right to intervene in the lives of people and decide you must get a paternity test? Mm-hmm. I don't think so. In the same way, we say no. Doing this particular thing as government is going too far, like how people know anti-vaccine. Yes. How is it that we have a country where less than 10% of people are vaccinated, but we have a country now where people are going to say, yeah, let's impose a paternity test at birth? Does government have that right? And is it that every time an issue like this one comes up, how we regulate it is we say government must set laws? Yes. That's the problem. So when we, and in response to the conversation this morning, there's something called ad hominem attacks, where we attack people personally. We're discussing an issue. Let's have a mature conversation on the issue. It's an issue that was brought into our parliament that deserves to be discussed. And my perspective is that a parliamentarian who doesn't do the necessary research is going to propose faulty public policy. That's it. Do the research. Is not just one perspective that exists. Herbert Gay's perspective is not the only perspective. Find out what the other ones are, and then we need politicians and parliamentarians who have the wit and who have the kind of thinking through ability to think through a situation such that they can present a public propose a policy or a legislation that works in the interest of all of us.
Right.
And we can't keep playing to the gallery because it's at this point in Jamaica, it's good to attack women because women speak up for women. No, that's not okay. All of us live here and all of us claim citizenship. So if it is that we hear something in Parliament and we are invited to speak, we can do so without being personally attacked.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Semaj, I know I said I was giving Nadine the final word, but Nadine brought up an important point. Government forcing individuals that certain things must be mandatory. Isn't that a dangerous path that we're walking down?
I don't think so. Anything that occurs in the public sphere that's not regulated will inevitably have to be subsidized. Just think about any version. Anything that's in the public sphere that's not regulated will eventually have to be subsidized, and all of us will have to pay for it. That's the role of government, to make sure that things in the public sphere are regulated so that we as a people don't have to pay for it for the rest of our lives. Just think about that.
We have to leave it there. Thank you as always, psychologist Dr. Leahcim Semaj and gender rights activist Nadine Spence. Thanks for your time this morning.